Throughout history, men and women have stood up against their suppressors,
fought for justice,
and risked their lives for the new generation.
This is a story of 1,200 men and women who stood against the more powerful companies in order to secure basic rights for miners through courageous acts of violence.
The miners in the Ludlow Massacre fought for better working conditions and a better lifestyle by joining together and taking a stand against John D. Rockefeller Jr. along with other big shot coal companies.
John D. Rockefeller Jr., also known as Jr., was born on January 29, 1874 in Cleveland, Ohio. He was the youngest of 4 children, but the only son born to the founder of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller Sr.
I took responsibility early, and like my parents, I was serious.
John D. Rockefeller Jr. says as he recalls his childhood, John continued schooling and at age 13 developed stress-related disorders. He would rely on his parents who provided him with love and affirmation as well as discipline. He later married Abby Aldrich, who was the daughter of a powerful senator from Rhode Island. John raised his children so that they would not be corrupted by the wealth of his family. In 1896, he went into the family business at Standard Oil. He wrote to his mother,
But know that I am not afraid to work or do whatever is required of me, and with God's help, I will do my best.
In 1910, he broke free from Standard Oil and decided to pursue a career in philanthropy. In September 1913, he destroyed the family name when the Ludlow Massacre began.
Colorado Fuel and Iron was the coal mining company that controlled many of the mines. John D. Rockefeller was on the board, owning 40% of the company. He was given his shares in the company as a birthday present from his father. For 25 years, coal companies had overused their powers, controlling most of the area from Trinidad to Walsenburg. Industrialization in the U.S. began when Samuel Slater brought the cotton mill and other new products from Britain to the U.S. This sparked interest in American inventors. By 1910, America was a country that relied on coal. Coal quickly became the most popular and necessary source of fuel in the U.S., powering factories, railroads, and heating the homes of Americans. Colorado Fuel and Iron, CF&I, was the largest private employer and the largest private landowner in Colorado, and the largest steel mill left of the Mississippi. CF&I brought industrialization to the West.
Miners from around the world clustered together living in mining towns built by the mining companies. When CF&I went to recruit workers across the world, their intent was to find people who didn't speak the same language so they wouldn't be able to unite and form a union. Many of the homes were shanties, isolated with leaky roofs and little light. Sometimes the villages were protected by armed guards, so miners could not leave the camps. Miners worked long shifts in the dangerous mines. Accidents in the southern mines were 5 times the national average for the industry. In 1910, over 400 miners died in Colorado. The miners worked all day, and at the end, their coal was weighed. The companies did not take into account the backbreaking work that was required to mine the coal. Also, many times, if there were other rocks mixed in with the coal, the companies would not pay them for the coal, but it was still collected. Then, the miners were paid in scrip, money that was only redeemable at company stores. The mine companies controlled the miners' lives.
The miners wanted an 8-hour workday with week limitations and to raise the minimum wage 10%. In Colorado, there is a set of safety laws, but they were rarely recognized. Workers wanted the laws to be enforced. Unfortunately, the big companies thought this was the miners' way of destroying their right to private property. Through the Ludlow Massacre, it is clear to see that they were willing to kill for these unalienable rights. Small acts of violence were beginning to emerge between 1913 and 1914. A miner would attack a company, and a company worker would attack a miner. One of the most prominent acts of violence from the company against the miner was the death of Gerald Lippett, a United Mines worker who was shot to death by George Belcher and Walter Bells, both allies of CF&I. A jury of 6 ruled it justifiable homicide. Following the events, the miners were enraged, and they set a deadline to the companies. They threatened to go on strike if their requests were not met by September 23, 1913. When the day came, nothing had changed, so 90% of the workforce, about 10,000 people, went on strike. Later that day, everybody living in the mining towns controlled by mine companies were evicted. They went to go live in tents supplied by the United Mines Workers of America, the UMWA. The UMWA made clusters of tent villages, one of the largest being in Ludlow. As the months went on, tensions rose and the miners began violently demanding that their rights be changed.
In 1914, John D. Rockefeller hired gunmen to raid the tents. The miners refused to succumb to the gunmen and continued to fight back. Can you imagine being forced out of your home at the end of a barrel? In an effort to suppress the uprising, the governor called in the National Guard to fight the miners in retaliation. When the National Guard first arrived, the miners and their families thought that the National Guard was on their side and was sent to aid them. When they began fighting the miners, they quickly realized that the troops were sent to destroy the strike. The National Guard began arresting people by the hundreds, but despite threats of violence, the miners did not give up. In April 1914, another National Guard company was brought in to fight the uprisers. On the morning of April 20th, 1914, a machine gun attack broke out on the tents. When a leader of the miners' militia went to negotiate a truce, he was shot dead and killed by guardsmen.
As a result of his death, women and children started digging pits underneath their tents to escape the massacre. When it turned dark, the people in the tents fell asleep, and the guardsmen snuck down from the hills and attacked. They lit the tents on fire, and as families fled the flames, the guardsmen shot at them. 13 people were killed in the gunfire. On April 21st, one day after the massacre, a telephone linesman was going through the ruins and found an iron cot covering a pit where he found burnt and distorted bodies of 11 children and 2 women. After the bodies were discovered, the incident was known as the Ludlow Massacre. 26 people were killed. During the massacre, women's rights activists rose up from the violence, voicing their concerns about human rights. Women empowerment skyrocketed. One feminist by the name of Mother Mary Harris Jones strongly favored labor strikes and actually encouraged miners to take a stance in the strike against John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s Colorado Fuel and Iron Incorporation.
At age 82, Mother Jones went to Trinidad to support those involved in the strike, and on January 4th, 1914, the National Guardsmen arrested Mother Jones and sent her back to Denver.
In support of Mother Jones, hundreds of women, from children to teenagers to mothers, marched through Trinidad and even pushed through police who tried to barricade the women from going any further.
Another feminist at the time of the Ludlow Massacre was Margaret Brown. She was very involved in Mother Jones' strike that took place in Leadville, Colorado.
Not only was Margaret part of this feminist movement, but she also took part in the founding of the Colorado chapter of National American Women's Suffrage Association, otherwise known as the NAWSA, which allowed women to have a voice at a time when they were not allowed to have one.
Just like when Margaret was on the Titanic, she never let someone go past her who needed help, so she worked in soup kitchens to help the destitute mining families.
In the short term, many labor rights groups emerged using the slogan, "Remember Ludlow." Shortly after the massacre, Rockefeller created a company union, which was an organization of workers that was not an independent trade union, but rather a group created by the company to ensure the rights of laborers. People who were in the union made a lot of progress by helping change the working and living conditions of miners.
In the long term, the Ludlow Massacre gave women the opportunity to protest the government that would later be beneficial to feminists who protested for women's rights. The Ludlow Massacre encouraged other miners working under the same conditions to rally together and take a stand. The idea of a massacre scared large coal and industrial companies to change their working standards to avoid an uprising.
Overall, the Ludlow Massacre brought upon new labor restrictions throughout America, and the miners who took a stand for their rights have enabled those in the present day to stand for theirs as well. Even though the miners were able to receive equal pay for equal work, today in the U.S. and specifically Colorado, we still argue about what minimum wage should be. By taking a look at this story, maybe we can prevail over the problems of the past and fight for a stronger future.